There we go. Sorry, I once again. I mean, maybe it's very fitting on the last lecture. After I thought I had figured out how to avoid making a mistake, so this will have to be part two. Um, my apologies. It's fitting, maybe after all of this, that I do it this way. But you need to look at the question and really address the question of the final. So I'm going to pull it up here. That was the problem. I clicked on the wrong button down at the bottom of my computer bar. I have pulled up in front of me, which I know you can't see, but I hope you will look at it on your own screen or after the lecture is done, the guide to writing the final exam. And in the italics, that is your actual question that you have to answer. Was the Reformation, in its religio-theological, political, social, cultural, and intellectual aspects, a revolution? If so, how so? If not, how not? How should the transformation of European society and culture from medieval to early modern be best described? Now, how do you approach that kind of a question? There's no way you can, let's say, adequately deal with that question in 12 to 15 pages. It's impossible. You should also know that there are no right or wrong answers. There are good answers and bad answers. And what makes a good answer is the extent to which you use the course material as evidence for your position. Now, how do you approach it? Well, first of all, implicitly, it's basically saying, what is the Reformation? How would you understand the Reformation? That's something I've talked about before. In the kind of guide before that, I said, you also need to refer to the various patterns of Reformation. We can look at the Reformation of the later Middle Ages. We can look at Luther's Reformation. We can look at the Reformation of the refugees. We can look at the English Reformation. We can look at the Catholic Reformation. We can look at confessionalization. We can look at religionization. Um, and all those should somehow be included to some factor. We can look at the questions of, a reformation for whom? Was it for the peasants? Certainly some of them thought so, but what did Luther say? How did it really transform society? And did it transform society? And what do we mean by that? Was it simply on the upper levels, or was it really the hearts and minds of all people? And that gets at the question of whatever this reformation was it a success or failure? So, in some ways, all of that is tied into the opening sentence, which just says the Reformation. And then, was it a revolution? Well, what is a revolution? That's difficult. I mean, scholars debate it. What constitutes a revolution? Um, we have referred to in part one of this lecture transition from early modernity to modernity, being the age of revolutions, referencing the American Revolution, French Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution. These were all upheavals that overthrew established structures in a relatively short period of time. Is all historical change revolutionary? Even Copernicus, talk about the scientific revolution, and often that begins with Copernicus, but Copernicus is, he was the first to use really the term revolution, his De Revolutionibus Celestium, Orbium Celestium, on the revolution of the heavenly bodies, published in 1543 after his death. It was not revolutionary at the time. It was somewhat controversial. The Pope used it for calendrical reforms. It certainly did not revolutionize the cosmology of medieval Christendom all that much until we get into Galileo. And what did Galileo have that Copernicus didn't? A telescope. He saw more. He had more evidence. And that led to even greater problems. And Copernicus was only condemned in 1619 after Galileo published his On the Starry Heavens. So is revolutionary change relatively quick, comprehensive change? Is it all change? What constitutes being revolutionary? What was the Peasants' War of 1525 a revolution? It's been called that. The text of the 12 articles that I posted for you in a PDF file was in an appendix to a book excellent book called The Revolutions of 1525. Were they revolutions? We can say, well, not really, because they failed. Well, are revolutions revolutions only if they're successful? Are attempted revolutions still revolutions? What constitutes revolution? Is it calling for an overthrow of existing structures? Could be. Some ways we could say in that sense, the Reformation, even most all the different patterns of the Reformation, were definitely revolutionary insofar as they sought to overturn and reject the basic structures of Rome and the Roman authority. But did they reject and overthrow the hierarchical structures of power that were there in medieval Christendom, or only the ecclesiastical hierarchies of power? Is only one facet, a revolution in one facet of society, sufficient for referring to it as a revolution? Again, there's not a right or wrong answer to that. How do you address it? How do you deal with it? I hope you will explicitly address the definition, how you're defining the terms, the Reformation and revolution. Otherwise, your final is going to be amorphous and lacking a strong argument. Because almost in some ways you might be comparing apples and oranges or just throwing out your own opinions and ideas. And I am not going to grade your opinions and ideas. It'd be very easy for me to do so because the basis would be, do I agree with you or not? And if I don't agree with you, you get a bad grade. If I do agree with you, you get a good grade. That, for me, would be wrong. What I can grade is how well you present your case, how well you present the evidence drawn from the course material to apply to your answer. In that sense, there are good answers and bad answers, not right ones and wrong ones. And it's not based on opinions or belief. Argue your case. And here I would suggest too, if you haven't read it the first time, read it for the first time. If you have read it at the beginning of the course, go back and read it again as you're preparing to write your final exam. The document posted in course documents, historical argument, because that's what you're presenting. Don't even phrase things, if you can avoid it, as I think, I feel, I believe. Those undermine your argument. Those undermine your position. Make an assertion and defend it. You defend it with detail, with evidence, textual evidence, with evidence from the course material, and what constitutes then that evidence from this course. All the assigned readings, especially the ones on which you are required to write textual analyses. That's in some ways leading up to this. You certainly may use your textual analyses for the final. Say, well, good, because 3 to 5 pages for those, I can just, string together, cut and paste, 4, 4, 4, and 4, that's 16 pages. That covers more than enough on the final exam. I'm done. That won't cut it. You have to address the question. I don't want simply cutting and pasting. By the way, there is no maximum limit. If you want to write, 80 pages on this final exam, you're most welcome to, as long as they're pertinent and good. And simply cutting and pasting your 4 text analyses, including those on the final, doesn't cut it in terms of pertinent and good. Okay, but in terms of using those documents as evidence for your argument, that I hope you will do. And you can use all the other assigned texts in the same fashion. That should be the primary basis of your evidence and your argument. You can also and should demonstrate that you have taken the lectures into account. It doesn't mean you have to cite or summarize every lecture whatsoever. But if you're making a point, especially if you're making a point that goes against the lecture, so to speak, then you do need to cite the lectures. Just say, as Sack argued in week 3, lecture 2, or whatever. But you need to demonstrate somehow that you've taken the lectures into account. And my book, Luther and the Reformation of the Later Middle Ages. Now, that constitutes the course material. The lectures and the assigned readings. Assigned readings being Luther and the Reformation of the later Middle Ages, as well as in all of the texts assigned, from Jordan of Quedlinburg's exposition of the Lord's Prayer to the spiritual exercises. And that was the last one. Also, now the passages that I read to you from the Council of Trent are there in the PowerPoint. The lecture on the Counter-Catholic Reformation. Those are documents you can bring in. Texts that I talked about in lectures uses textual evidence. And in this light, the final is really asking, so what? Reformation, so what? How do you put all this information together? How do you analyze it and apply it to the question given? It's not asking for your opinion. It's not asking for your belief. It's asking for your analysis and argument. I think that about covers it. So do you have to explicitly address all those different factions, let's see, or components? Let's say they're the theological, political, social, cultural, intellectual aspects. You definitely have to do so in some fashion. And the more explicit you can be about that, the better. If you can work all of those terms in, that will be a help. I would assume maybe the religio-theological and political would be perhaps the easiest. Social and cultural, intellectual. Intellectual you can almost equate with the theological. The social, we look at the social movements, the peasant unrests from the later Middle Ages through the peasant uprisings and then into the 16th century. The Reformation of the refugees was not necessarily an elite movement at all. And on we could go from there. And it's also perfectly acceptable to say the Reformation was a revolution in some respects and not in others. That is also an adequate, a very adequate approach to take. Make the question your own. What did you find most interesting in this course? What kind of stirred your interest and might like to follow up with more? And use that as your kind of key through this mountain of material, because it's too much. It is too much. How do you deal with that too much? One approach would be, I'm just going to throw up my hands and say I can't do it because it's too much. The other approach would say, I'm going to simplify it and just talk about what I think and believe. But how do you analyze it and present your argument? I hope this helps. I think I'm going to leave it there. I'll go and get the 2 parts of this lecture posted. If you have questions, please email. If you have any problems, please email me. And we can try to address those problems and issues. I'm happy to address questions on the exam. I often say this, I'm even happy to read drafts. And that is, there's a caveat. I'm happy to read drafts. I'm not going to tell you, how to write it. I'm not going to edit it for you. But I can make general comments on a draft in terms of, well, maybe this section needs more, you add more here, and you really don't deal with this aspect of it. That really what you got out of it, reading that text, what's the evidence for it, and things like that. So I can make general comments. I will read drafts on a first-come, first-served basis. I will do so, let's see, the final is due on May 5th. I will do so up until May 2nd. Meaning, I shouldn't say that. I'll do so, if no one has sent me a draft and someone sends me a draft on May 4th, I'll try to get to it, okay? The point being, though, I will get to them on a first-come, first-served basis if I have time to do so. The sooner you might send me a draft, the more likely it is that I'll get to it. I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. But if everybody sends me a draft on the May 4th or even on May 3rd, I'm not going to be able to comment on any of them because I'm not going to give responses to a few of you and not to others if you've all submitted drafts. So this is simply an offer, and I will do what I can to help. The deadline, I believe the guide says it's due at 5. I believe on Canvas it says it's due at 11:59. I hate deadlines. We need to have a deadline because I have to get your finals graded and final grades submitted. 11:59 is the cutoff. I'm not going to go back and change that, meaning no final exams will be accepted after 11:59 on May 5th, 11:59 p.m. on May 5th. If you can get it in by 5, that would be good, because I'll start grading. I'll start grading as they come in. So I hope, how do I say this? I'm not one to be rigid with rules, but likewise, there are some firm rules that you just need to follow. If there's any problems, if you have an emergency or something, email me and we'll try to address those issues. But the absolute deadline is 11:59. I'm not going to extend that at all. So if you submit after 11:59 p.m., it will say close, and that will be that. And so if you find yourself at the problem, email me and we can address that issue rather than feeling like, oops, I missed it. Now what? And sending me an email. I went to submit, but it was close. I don't want to hear those kinds of excuses. But receiving emails with problems beforehand, definitely we can deal with those to the extent possible. Okay. So put your best foot forward. Make this your best effort. What you submit represents you. Keep that in mind as well. I'm very much looking forward to reading your finals. I hope you enjoy writing them. I know that may be kind of a perverse thing for me to say, but I hope maybe after you submit them, you'll reflect back and see writing the final was a good experience and a learning experience. I hope you've enjoyed the course and gotten something out of it. I wish you all the best. Good luck in completing your final. And it's been enjoyable for me, and I hope it has been for you. Thank you so much, even with all the glitches and everything else. Thank you so much. And I look forward to the final exam. Bye-bye.